What is reality? Obviously, no one can say because it isn't words. It isn't material, that's just an idea. Reality is... cannot be explained in words.
Welcome to Really Though. Searching for what's really real is what we're all about. Mm-hmm. No matter what the topic, that's what you're going to get from us, is the search for what's really real. And we never ever claim to ever get there.
That's real.
We are constantly searching. So if we ever 100%. Get to a place where we feel like something is 100, that must be it, we will still be like, seems pretty right.
We're 98%. Like, yeah.
There's
a little, like 1%, 2%.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's always going to be a little bit of that. But yeah, dude, we're excited to present today's podcast episode to you guys. Finally, we're taking a breather from the death strokes.
from the Death Star that's coming to destroy our planet. Bro, this is like a breath of fresh air, man. Talking with our guest today was like, we needed a nice guy, bro. The last couple weeks we've become not nice guys anymore. What happened to us, man?
It's just we're bombarded with so much, man. It just gets to be so draining. It's tough. And it's all bad news. We've just been hearing just constant bad news. So then you just go, God, man.
So who would have thought we would have got the gospel good news from a fellow non-believer? You know what I'm saying?
Oh, God. Yeah, dude.
So this guy we have on the show today, his name is Jon Steingard. He's the former lead singer of a Christian rock band named Hawk Nelson. And like in my days of touring and stuff, we played a lot of festivals where they were at. So we've sort of rubbed shoulders, but I'd never really gotten to know him the way you and I got to know him today. And man, what a guy, man! I got
such a solid dude,
bro. I got nothing but good things to say.
You know what? Too, it's the kind of thing that you know how there's those people that when you're about to get into a confrontation or a certain conversation or something like that, you wish that they're there with you because you're like, oh, dude, if he's there, he'll be able to like you'll feel safe and secure and shit like that.
Because if you don't got something to say, he gonna have something to say.
Yes, and he'll come with like a gang of facts and like a gang
and he's just a nice, calm white man.
Yeah, dude, it just feels like peaceful.
I'm peaceful, I'm calm, and I'm white. We can talk. What's going on here? Don't worry about it. I'm calm and white.
Right. I'd love to have him with us when we do some of the street stuff that we're going to do, like interviews and stuff. That would be kind of cool sometime.
Yeah. Well, hopefully you connect with him too, because he's also does video work. So
I know I got to talk to him more about that because I didn't realize like how deep that went.
Well, anyway, bro, I think without further ado, we should just get to the interview. What do you think?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, man. This is our interview with Jon Steingard from Hawk Nelson. We know you're going to love it. Really, though? Really, though. Well, it looks good, bro. It looks like you're in a doomsday bunker, bro.
Yeah. Well, that's the idea.
Right.
Yeah.
That's the idea.
Drive into the mountains and just live off the land, right? You're drinking. Looks like you're drinking out of a honey jar. What was that? Honey? You're drinking.
This is a conversation to be had over a beer, my friends.
As you should, bro. And hey, listen, on this show, we let it loose. If we did a whole episode on why we will cuss. So that the Christians would understand where we were coming from.
Sure. That's cool.
Yeah.
And this is Nesto, by the way. This is Nesto.
What's up, Nesto? How you doing, man?
Nice to meet you, dude.
Are you in LA as well, or?
Yeah. Long Beach, actually.
Long Beach. Oh, dude, I've got friends there, man.
Oh, word?
Yeah.
Nice.
So Nesto literally like preached that episode. He had scripture verses to back up why it was okay for us to
It was
cuss.
our first episode. It was us easing in because we weren't sure how we're going to structure what we're doing and how we present it. You know, because most people know us from a certain standpoint. So we kind of... Similar
to you.
Yeah. So we kind of just wanted to just bring that. So if anybody was like, hey, man, what about? We'd be like, just listen to episode whatever, you know.
Right. It's like, well, dude, there's this, I mean, I'm finding there's this whole community of people that were involved in Christian music in the mid 2000s or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
That have sort of grown and changed and evolved and are trying to figure out exactly exactly what we all believe specifically and the details of it all. And then how to apply that to our lives and how that looks now tends to not be exactly the same as how it looked 15 years ago, which is growth, right? If it is the same, you're not growing.
Yeah. Well, this is good stuff. So let's actually officially start it that way.
Love it.
We don't burn any content.
Sure.
No burning content.
All right. I was just jamming King Kong over here.
Oh man, thank you. That's one of our more famous songs because it got on that Tony Hawk.
Right.
Who am I? I'm the one with no release date, the one who MC's great like the taste of Philly cheesesteaks. So a beat breaks, I need cake, but won't resort to cheapskate. I make your knees shake, cause every rhyme I spit's a keepsake for Pete's sake.
I think that's that. Well, we should not burn content. I have something to say about that.
Okay, let's get started then. All right, you guys ready? Well, yeah, man. Like we promised last week, we got our special guest here. This is Jon Steingard, formerly of the band Hawk Nelson. Say what's up to the people,
man. What's up, fam? How you doing?
I'm sure they're all screaming right now, like, yeah, or maybe F this guy.
Yeah.
But just so you know, so our podcast mission statement is searching for what's really real.
Dude, I love that.
Right. And so everything we do is all about that. If we're talking about any subject, it's just about what is the truth in that subject.
Yeah, man. I love that. I'm all about that. And I'm ready to get into it with you.
Nice. Well, check this out. Yeah. So that was great because our stories are very similar to yours and coming out of Christianity and things like that. But what happened was when you say you're searching for what's really real and you really open up yourself, you end up going in a lot of directions, man. And I tell you, like you're kind of saving us. Let me just put it that way, because like the last month and a half, it's been so much like politics and conspiracy theories and like last week it just got to a boiling point and we're like, dude, we're so glad.
Can we talk about something else?
Yeah, we're so glad Jon is coming back. It's coming next week. We can get back to talking about religion.
Sure, yeah.
It's like the easy subject. We never thought that'd be the easy subject. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like,
well, it's easy and it's also endless and sort of bottomless. So yeah, you can go as long and as far on it as you want. It seems like.
Yeah. So. You came on my radar in a way that a lot of people, you came on their radar recently with your Instagram post and what was going on with you. And I caught wind of you and I heard some interviews on different podcasts and YouTube interviews and whatnot. So, you instantly from both sides of the argument became very in demand. And I was like, wow, this guy, when I heard your story, and Nesto can attest to this too, but me very specifically, I was like, oh my God, this guy's story sounds so much like mine, being that we both come from the Christian music background.
Yeah.
And I was like, we got to get this guy on the show. And I was like, Nesto, I don't know. I mean, he's big time, bro. And everybody wants him right now. And
this is embarrassing.
And guess what? He's so good looking, Nesto. I don't know if he'll get on the show, bro. Have you seen his hair? He's not going to come on our show, bro. He looks too good. But here he is, man. I know, man. See? Come on, man. That's not a tight hairstyle like yours. But seriously, we're really grateful that you're on the show, man, for real, and we're very excited about this. My memories. So, LA Symphony, we started out just as kids, rapping, doing our thing. We all met because of our background as Christians and our faith in God, but we were all just trying to rap and do our thing.
Yeah.
And we ended up like putting out a record and getting signed very quickly. We didn't even want to be on a Christian label.
What label were you guys on?
We were on Squint. So like with Sixpence None the Richer and Chevelle and all them.
Yes, I remember,
And they wanted to make us their hip hop success story like Sixpence was. And it was a very exciting time. Yeah. You know, shout out to Steve Taylor. I mean, a lot was going on.
Oh my gosh, Steve Taylor.
Bro, what a guy. Yeah.
Dude, I just before we came on to have this conversation, I was like, I need to like remind myself what these guys sounded like. So I went and listened to a few things and I was like, dude, you know, you and I, all of us, we have music that we can go back and listen to that we made a long time ago. And there's always different kinds of feelings you can have when you listen to stuff that you made you know, like almost 20 years ago. Right. And I jammed King Kong and I was like, dude, this holds up.
Yeah, I know. Thanks.
Way more than anything I feel like I've ever been a part of.
Oh, man, I appreciate that.
Like it just took me, it instantly took me back in such a positive way that I feel like maybe a lot of like more pop punk stuff like I was involved in probably wouldn't take me back to such a good place.
Right. But you know what's crazy though is because we're hip hoppers, but Signing the Squint catapulted us into the Christian market.
Yeah.
Like we weren't really.
Was that your intention or was that no? Okay.
No, we wanted to do, you know, and that wasn't even their intention per se, but Steve Taylor, you remember it's slipping my mind now. They were like big youth leader conventions they'd have every year.
Acquire the Fire or
no, it was specifically for youth leaders. It was
youth leaders. Was it like I mean, I'm forgetting.
At any rate,
I think I know more or less what you're talking about.
Right.
Yeah.
So he got asked to speak at them, and then there was one here in Anaheim, and he goes, "You know what? I'm gonna have LA Symphony perform at it." And the whole idea was, hey, this is how we're presenting Christian music. This was in 2000. We got signed, and he's like, this is what we're doing. You know, outward focused. You know, it doesn't have to be all Jesus-y. We can just be these great representatives, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. So
he does this speech. And I tell people this, man, we could have came out on stage, knocked the turntables over. One guy could have pissed himself. And we still would have been looking like golden boys the way he spoke of us. Like he set us up so strongly, like we couldn't fail. We rocked the show. We spent like 2 hours. Every youth leader in the place seemed like wanted a CD. We sold more CDs. So think about what happened. Those were all youth leaders, right?
Yeah.
And then he saw the power of that. So he took us to the next two that was in like North Carolina and Atlanta. So now in a matter of weeks, we were in front of thousands of youth leaders. So guess what happened to our bookings after that?
Yeah, all Christian bookings.
Oh my God, yeah. We were doing mostly like clubs and hip hop venues, and it almost immediately went 50-50 and eventually started to surpass. And then when you compare, you know, the money that you get in a maybe a door split at a bar or a club.
Right.
Versus
that happens quickly. We had a sort of similar experience. Like when we started out, our philosophy was like we'll play anywhere that would let us play, and we're Canadian too, so you know we'd come down across the border, we'd come to the US, and we didn't have places to live down here. So we told our booking agency, if there's a place that'll give us $500 to play for the night, then we'll do absolutely anything. and so we played like 270 shows a year for the first couple years in a van and trailer.
Yeah.
Like our van, his name was Steve, and you could like as you're driving down the road, there was like rusted out holes in the floor of the van. You could like see the stripes going by on the road.
Wow.
Through the floor. It didn't have AC and it didn't really have heat. So in the winter, what you would do is like if you were cold, you'd lie on the floor and the like exhaust system would heat the floor.
That sounds so similar. It's funny, like
it's like, but you also like, it sounds horrible, but it's also amazing, and you love, you know, like it was such a great season. We were young and single. Yeah. We didn't.
Absolutely. It's funny. Like it doesn't even matter the genre of music. We're hip hop. You guys were doing, and it's such a similar. We had the blue van. We had the trailer. I remember driving on winter roads, laying on the floor for the warmth, all of that stuff, man, and just crammed in the van. And
you probably didn't. You probably didn't have as much gear as we had. I don't know. Were you traveling with a band or was it?
Nah.
Yeah.
Well, but when the original lineup was 8 rappers and a DJ. So yeah, it was like where we lacked in like equipment, we made up in bodies. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and bodies take up way more space.
Dude, and rap dudes, especially when we first started out, rap dudes, see, you rock dudes, you'll just throw t-shirts on and like some Vans and do every show in the same gear. When we first started touring, we'd have these giant suitcases we were trying to style out, man. You got to look fly when you're a rapper. So we would come with like every pair of shoes, every hat, like, but we learned quick to tour. And that kind of brings me to like, even how we've crossed paths with you guys numbers of times. In the touring circuit, especially during the summer, we started getting booked for a lot of these Christian festivals. Really, Cornerstone and Spirit West Coast, all these festivals. And that's where we started interacting with a lot of rock bands and punk bands and started really making all these friendships. And although you and I never really like talk like we're talking now, I remember like one particular time hanging out with Hawk Nelson. And the reason why I remember this is because you guys gave us all free t-shirts. And bro, it was like, that became like the thing because we started scaling back on the gear. So it was always like a hustle. Like we'd hit a festival and be like, yo man, that t-shirt's dope, man. That's dope. And they're like, and it's like totally leading them. And they're like, dude, you want one? Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. And then like, we just build our gear and just wear your guys' clothes. Bro, you guys had great shirts, and I remember all of us wearing them so much on tours all the time.
Oh, right on, man.
Yeah.
Dude, I remember doing that same thing, being like, okay, so, because what we would do at the beginning is we paid ourselves $5 a day. That's what we paid ourselves.
Oh, you guys were cheap.
So
like, rap guys are too bougie, man. I think we were like, dude, I need 10. I need 10, man. No way.
But I remember like I would eat. My strategy was I would eat a dollar menu McChicken for lunch and another one for dinner.
Oh my God.
Unless like if it was a show day, then there'd be food around. You'd scrounge whatever you could get. But like, there's no like buying clothes money in there. So I remember doing the exact same thing, being like, "Oh, that's a cool shirt, man." Yeah,
I know. And then you just wait,
and then just be quiet for a second, and then just kind of stand there, and they'll be like, "Do you want one?" And they're like, and you can see they're doing the math. They're like, "Oh man, cost on these ones is actually a little more than these ones." So.
I know. What about a hoodie? I'm kind of cold. Like, if you could get a hoodie, then you were really. I mean,
no. If you try and get a hoodie from another band, that's an ask.
Yeah,
that's an ask.
For real. Yeah, and you know what's crazy? It's like we were so broke that people would try to do that to us, and be like, "Yeah, man, they are dope, right?" And just leave it out. Meanwhile, we would have a merch table, and then you walk by like Toby Mac's like merch, like a whole swap meet merch area, like $25,000 a night, easy. And like they would be there. He would do one show like the first night of the tour, but his merch would stay there the whole tour, just $25,000 a day. Boom, 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 and we're like, I just want a sandwich, please. Oh man, but you're right. Those are really great days. And
it's fun to reminisce about them, and I'm so glad I have them. But I'm fine to not go back. Also,
now, I love traveling and I love doing the shows, but that, you're right. Plus I have a wife and kids, and she's not playing with that. She's like, "You're not. How much are you gonna make? I want to know the numbers, or you're not leaving at all."
How many kids do you have?
I have 2 boys.
How old are they?
8 and 5.
8 and 5. Nesto, you got kids?
No kids, man.
No.
I was married for 12 and a half years, but got divorced in 2008. Never had kids.
Oh man. I'm sorry to hear that, man. Well, dude,
I don't think Nesto is,
man.
Yeah, bro.
Yeah. I've had some close calls, but nothing.
Yeah, we've had some close calls too. Yeah. I've got a 3-year-old and a 2-year-old.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Those were extremely close calls.
Those were very close. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, man, I just kind of wanted to establish that too, because like I said, although we haven't had like a friendship, we've ran in similar circles for a lot of years.
Man.
We toured that circuit from 2000 to about 2007, 2008, pretty heavily. You know what I mean? And so it was a really cool time. And so hearing your story, like it immediately took me back to those times and stuff. But just for our listeners, see, I came out with my disbelief and my heresy or whatever, quite a few years probably before you, and I wasn't as popular as you, but put it this way, most of my old fans pretty much hate me, so they're probably not, for the most part. I mean,
do you feel like in the hip hop community in particular, there's a different sense of emphasis on authenticity in a way that they would feel like you weren't being authentic, or is that irrelevant?
Meaning like before when I was proclaiming Christianity or something?
Right.
I think
it's like a loyalty thing.
I think it's similar to like, cause I've watched some of the interviews that Christians have done with you since you've, kind of made your announcement. And I think it's a similar thing where, the default a lot of times is that you never believed in the first place.
Yes. I've definitely had people say that to me.
Yeah. And, but what I was leading to was, I don't think I have a lot of fans from back in that day that really follow me or especially follow this show. So I just maybe at a good starting point, just give them like a quick brief, like synopsis, who you are and kind of where you come from. I mean, we kind of touched on it already, but for
sure. Yeah. So the short version, hopefully, is, grew up in Canada. My dad's a pastor, still is. So I grew up in an evangelical Christian home, a very charismatic evangelical Christian home. So all kinds of like speaking in tongues, slain in the spirit, praying for healings and praying for signs and wonders, like all kinds of, lots of flag waving, that kind of stuff. And then around the age of 20, I started touring with this band, Hawk Nelson, kind of a pop rock band. I was the guitar player initially, and then our singer left in 2012, and I moved over into the singer role, which was super, super strange. And that story could be a podcast in itself, so we won't dive too much into it. But yeah, I became the singer in 2012 and the main songwriter. So I really, from 2012 until 2017, I was writing probably 200 songs a year or so.
Wow.
So yeah,
that's a lot of songs.
Honestly, it's not. I mean, for me, it wasn't sustainable. It was really taxing. But I basically got to a place over the last few years where I started, on the side, I started doing video production, and that side hustle grew really rapidly, and I got to a place pretty quickly where I was like, wow, if I wanted to do this for a living, I could definitely do this full time.
Yeah.
And then that made me think like, okay, well, is that something I would want to do? And the thought of having more control over my life and more freedom and being able to be home with my wife, and my wife and I had been married, almost 10 years at that point. We're coming up on 14 now.
Wow.
So I started thinking, man, like I've done this band thing for a long time. It's starting to feel like we're doing the same shows every year, same festivals. Like, is there? Are we just treading water here? And like, is there more life out there? And so I started moving in the direction of doing more video work. And I had a talk with the guys and told them like I kind of wanted to back away from doing music, and I wanted to do more video production. And that was a hard conversation, but we worked it through and kind of developed a plan. Like, okay, we're gonna phase this thing out over a few years so that everyone has a chance to get their feet under them and figure out what they're going to do for careers and stuff like that.
That's fair.
And I had this realization one day that once I'm not doing Hawk Nelson anymore, then it doesn't, in a career sense, it doesn't matter what I believe anymore. It's like, I no longer have a career that requires me to be a professional Christian. And so once I had that thought, it made me go like, okay, so what do you actually believe if you have the freedom to believe whatever?
Wow.
And I realized that I had never fully contemplated that. Like I grew up in a Christian home, so that was my normal. I started touring, you know, pretty much right out of high school, and I was in Christian circles that whole time. And there was nothing other than being a Christian. There just wasn't anything else.
Right.
And so once I realized, you know, like, okay, what do I actually believe? And I started digging into it, and I started reading a bunch of stuff about, you know, the history of Christianity. I started learning a bunch of perspectives that I had never experienced before. Mm-hmm. And I got to a place where I was like, I don't think I believe this.
Wow.
And everyone, you know, I'm sure you experienced this. A lot of people think that when you sort of take a step back from faith or whatever, that you're doing it because you want to go, because you're in sin, or you're right, or you want to be. Yeah. Like, oh, like you must be sin, you know, you must be an alcoholic, or you must be a drug addict, or you must be in an affair, or you must be gay. I literally, I'm not joking. Once a day, I have someone tell me that, like, oh, I know you're gay, and I'm like, but
that's crazy.
And I'm just like, you're leveling this at me as an insult, but like, all of my friends that are gay are awesome. Yeah. And so I'm like, but I'm just like, that's not an insult to me, but it's also not correct. So this is weird.
It's one of those things, though, and I can definitely relate to that. Is like when you have this thing and it sort of shatters. It almost starts to shatter somebody else's paradigm, or like, no, and they want to quickly put it in a box that makes sense to them and makes them feel comfortable. So they're like, oh, he's sinning. Oh, they like to say he lost his faith. And I don't really agree with that. In a lot of ways, it takes more faith, what you're doing. Well, to be able to say, I don't know, and I'm exploring, you know.
I felt like for me, it was journeying out of the known into the unknown. Right. That's what it felt like for me. And maybe it felt that way for you as well. But for me, it was, you know, it wasn't a loss, but in the sense it was a loss because it wasn't really a welcome thing for me. I wasn't looking to sort of not believe in God anymore. Yeah. It just sort of happened. And quite honestly, like it really terrified me.
I can relate.
I felt like I had gone through my life up till that point with so much certainty, and I no longer had certainty. I felt like I had gone through my life believing that God was always going to provide for me, and now, like, who's going to provide for me? You know, have I just gotten lucky this whole time? And you know, my children, what am I going to teach them? And if something happens to me, who's looking out for them? And all of these things. And so it actually sort of sent me into a pretty dark place for a while. I started going to therapy, which I had never done before. And therapy changed my life. Yeah. It completely changed my life. And
before you go there fully, I got two questions.
Sure. Yeah.
Was your wife Christian along with you? Like what was going on with her during that time? And also, were you guys going to a church building during that time as well? When you were?
Great. Oh, no. Great questions. So, ever since I started touring, which was like 17 years ago when I was 20, we were always playing shows on weekends, which I'm sure you guys, get. So my wife and I had a really hard time like finding a church home. Right. So when we lived in Nashville for a long time, and we went to a few different churches here and there. But I was gone almost every weekend. It was really, really hard to get, plugged in, air quotes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right.
So I mean, so there was a church we started going to, but it was really half-hearted. Like I was going to it was a big church in Nashville, and we went there because a number of our friends were going there. But like whenever we went, I didn't want to meet anybody, I had, spent, my whole career meeting people at Christian events. And I was just like, if I go to church, I have friends. I like my life. Like, I don't.
Yeah. Why don't you come serve? Why don't you serve on the praise team? You're like, oh God, please. You're a singer, right? Jump up on stage. Just lead us in worship. Come on.
Right.
Man.
No. And then when my wife and I moved to LA in 2014, we started going to Hillsong LA, which was brand new at that time. And I guess it was 15 we started going. And honestly, like I think I was curious because I loved Hillsong's music. I thought that they, like United and Young and Free, were doing like really cool stuff. And so I was like, it felt like the cool thing to do, but I don't feel like my heart was ever really in it.
Yeah, I understand.
And I remember being plugged into a church back in my hometown, or various hometowns because we moved around a little. But that feeling of being connected to a church in that way, I don't think I've ever really had that in my adult life.
Interesting.
Wow, that's big.
I guarantee you those are all things that people think about you as reasons why you're coming to the place you're at now.
Sure.
Yeah.
Which it really, again, I go back to, because this is sort of, Ernesto can attest to this too. I'm sure he's experienced this in his own walk out of faith, or whatever you want to call it, deconversion, or whatever people like to label it as, is that it's just, they just can't, it can't be what it really is, like because I was very similar to you. I started getting questions that I wasn't asking for. I wasn't trying to think against I was indoctrinated since birth, brought up, my dad wasn't a pastor, they just went to church, but I went to church school, in the youth group, like everything was church. So, I wasn't looking for that. I was serving in the church. I was doing my music. I was doing, and just the questions kept coming. And I actually actively tried to, I guess, like apologize to myself. Like, let me get the information so I can get back on track and get myself back into my faith, my church, my this, my that. And it just wasn't happening. The more I dug, the more it unraveled for me.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And I was talking to pastors, talking to listening to, reading books, all of this. And it just wasn't happening.
Yeah. My experience was similar. I've had a number of people say, well, you just need to, you need to make sure you're in the Word. You need to read the Bible. And to that, I respond, I'm like, actually, over the last year, I've read it more than I ever have in my life. And that's part of the problem.
Yeah.
That
makes a lot of atheists.
Well, it's like, if you're not disturbed at all, or mystified at all, I'm not sure you've read it. Like,
right.
So
that's very true. It's very true that they haven't read it.
I've been studying like it's my job the last year or so, and I'm super intrigued by the Bible because on one hand, it's full of ideas that are so revolutionary for its time, and so incredible, and they've been applied to humanity in ways that are really fantastic and beautiful. But then it's also full of stuff that's kind of horrifying.
Yeah.
And when you really study the sort of how many of the ideas in the Bible were taken from other sort of places, you kind of go, man, this is a really human book.
Right.
Yeah.
But Nesto, to answer your other question about my wife real quick, she is in almost exactly the same place as me. Her dad is also a pastor, also evangelical Christian background.
Yeah.
And she has had a lot of the same doubts and questions as me, but she's less likely to sort of like process them by reading like 120 books or whatever it is.
Right.
So so she's more likely to like, she'll check in with me, you know, and be like, okay, so what do you believe now? And I'm like, well, you know, and I'm just like, well, it depends on the day, you know?
Right.
So I sort of am always telling her the gist of what I've been reading and
this sounds so much like my house.
Yeah, I know, right? The thing that we both feel is we felt, and we weren't sure, when you're in it as much as we were, you don't always realize how restrained you feel. And then once you openly say, I don't think I believe this anymore. And you tell people, and they no longer have the expectation that you do. There's this sense of freedom that's like, wow, like I can just be totally honest about what I think and what I feel.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
And so both my wife and I have really, really appreciated that sense of freedom.
Oh, that's great.
So good, dude.
Yeah.
I know for me, there was such a feeling of the need to defend God to the world, you know, like, hey, he's getting a bad rap. Let me explain. And growing up in church, that was presented as like a good thing. Like, we're the go-betweens, just like Jesus is the go-between the Father and us, to, like, you know, just calm down the giant monster and show you, here's how a human would be, and to represent it. It was like, okay. So there was always this weird dichotomy of like, hey, so Jesus is the nice one because he turned into a man and died. The Holy Spirit, very spooky. We have no idea what's going on. We just know that he had sex with Mary and created, you know, Jesus. And then God, whoa, don't get on his bad side. Very freaky things get out. You know, storms, destruction. He's very angry, likes a lot of blood and chaos. Don't read certain portions of the Bible that explain too much about him. They'll freak you out.
Right.
Like there's all this stuff that you had to like navigate through just to present something beautiful, because when you hand them this chaotic book and say, hey, read this. Bro, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
I mean, like, what are you giving people? Like, even when I was a hardcore Christian, dude, I was scared to hand people a Bible. Because I was like, wait a minute. Shouldn't we be giving them an outline? Shouldn't we rip out pages and say, just read this letter. Stick to this one letter for a while. Get that in you. It was like, no, because wherever they open, God will reveal something to them. Well, I don't know, man.
Well, hopefully they don't. Hopefully they don't start at Deuteronomy 20 when God commands them to take slaves, or Numbers 31 where God tells them to save the young women that have not slept with a man and have them for themselves. Maybe.
Yeah. Wouldn't they just want to stick
hopefully
to that?
They don't start there.
Yeah. Or any of those passages that say, "Go, the land is yours," and they're like, "Well, there's people there, God." Yeah. No, just kill all of them, slaughter them, because who cares about them?
And then if you bring that up, you know, people will be like, "Oh, well, they were wicked," and I'm like, Well, you know.
But isn't the message that we all are wicked and we all fall short of the glory of God? Yeah. It's like it's very murky waters, and that was part of the breaking down of my faith, is that the basic, which to me started to be very common sense questions, where I was getting terrible answers for.
Yeah.
And then I would look at the other side, like, what do atheists say? What do scientists say? What do archaeologists say? What's out there? And all of those things, when you step back and say, this is a non-believer who's analyzing biblical text, from his viewpoint, and similar, like you said, like then you start learning the history of the Bible, who wrote it, when, why, where, and then you start hearing about more ancient writings that had similar stories, or like almost plagiarized in a way. Yeah. And you go, you know, it made it a lot easier for me, and I can understand that moment when you finally, because I didn't for a long time say to myself, I don't believe this. I don't even know if I actually said, I think I'm an atheist, until me and him started this show, and Nesto specifically asked me, and I said, I think, yes, I am, but it's not to me. And again, we always say we're searching for what's really real. That's we say it every week. They're probably sick of us saying it, but we invite not that we want to debate, but we invite the challenge, or we invite that. Please bring us your evidence, what you feel is facts, what you feel is important. And if it presents itself, I'm more than willing to accept something that's evidenced, true, factual things that I can see for myself and say, okay, this is true. You know what I mean?
I love that, man, because like I have a sort of similar mantra that I've sort of developed. I my favorite author of all time is C.S. Lewis, and obviously he was a believer. Yeah. And he's still my favorite author. My favorite book of all time is called The Great Divorce. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it. It's really short, actually. It's sort of it's his picture of what heaven and hell might be. And he explicitly says, you know, that you know, he doesn't actually think this is what it's going to look like, but it's a representation of his beliefs about who God is and that stuff. And I read it, you know, maybe once a year because it's not a long read and it's really powerful. And basically in the story, anyone who is, one of the things he says is for those people that end up in hell, earth was just the beginning of hell for them. It was always hell. And for those people that end up in heaven, then earth was just the beginning of heaven. And so this line between eternity and now is sort of not real, right? And I think that's really beautiful, first off. And then in the book, he basically tells all these stories of people having these conversations with people that are already in heaven who are just trying to invite them in. And the only thing keeping these individuals that are potentially entering heaven, the only thing that keeps them from staying is their own stubbornness and their own lack of an ability to let things go and just accept what is. And they're so fixated on something like maybe a romantic relationship, or maybe like a career, or something in their life that has become the most important thing for them, that they're missing what's right in front of them, the goodness that's right in front of them. And I look at that and I go, man, that's just true. No matter what you believe, it's like, how many people do you know are missing out on what good could be because they're so fixated on the good that they think they have a right to, that has been twisted and it's not even good anymore.
Yeah.
And so my sort of mantra is like, when I'm thinking about the idea of God, I think I'm ready to submit to being, which is like, being is like being itself. Like I'm here, I'm alive, and I think it's more good than bad. And so whatever is at the base of this life, this reality, I think is more good than bad. And I don't know what that is or what that means, but I'm ready to submit to whatever is real, and to accept whatever is real, and to seek out whatever is real. And so that, I feel like my little submit to being mantra is kind of not that far off from
not at all. Yeah. It's very similar. And the way you're talking right now, it really reminds me of something that I wanted to bring up with you, which is, so when I left Christianity and I walked away from Christian music, you know, you could hear it in my music when I started putting out solo music, from the first record to the second to the third. You know, about the fourth record, it was like, the first thing I did was say, shit, so people would know there's my line. Like, now I'm done with all of you guys who keep, you know, it's like, I'm doing music for people who don't care about me.
Right.
So why am I doing that? You know, I'm not living. So anyway, but there wasn't as many people as when you walked away. Like, there's literally probably hundreds of thousands of people who are Hawk Nelson fans, who followed the band since they were in youth group or whatever the case may be. What I find interesting is, because of that, you have had an influx of people with all their different opinions of you, all their different questions, all their condescension that I've heard. I've seen a lot of things. I've watched some interviews where people try to mask their condescension and contempt for you with a pseudo-Christian bullshit question. I watched it. I see it. Yeah. And the thing that impresses me about you is you are like the most kindest, calmest dude. And like, you're like, you know what? You're right. I probably am that. Like, you're just, I don't like, you're really prepared for that. Like, I haven't heard no combativeness, nothing from you. It's amazing. Like, I'm impressed.
It's there. I try to keep a level head in those conversations. I can't say I've never gotten riled up. Usually on the face-to-face stuff, it tends to not happen. It tends to more happen in like, if I get a DM that's really snarky and I'm just like, I'm gonna, especially when I'm really in danger is when someone's really rude and they're also really wrong. And like obviously wrong.
Yeah.
Because then I'm just like, I'm gonna wreck you. And
oh, good. So you are, you're a little more like us then. Okay.
Well, it's there, man. I try. I try in the face-to-face conversations, especially, and as much as possible, to go like, okay, what am I trying to accomplish? And I don't feel like me like getting a good jab in my experience. Well, I was a really opinionated teenager and also had a very sort of analytic mind. And so I was pretty good at like just saying something that could really, really nail somebody when I was a teenager. And I remember my mom she basically taught me, she's like, you have got to get that under control as you become an adult, because if you don't, it's really going to damage your life. And that lesson like stuck with me.
Yeah.
So I'm in those conversations, I'm always like, okay, what's my goal? How can I walk this out kindly? And honestly, part of it is just that I've seen enough of those conversations that if someone's watching them, like a debate, for instance, whoever keeps the coolest head will appear to win. Mm-hmm. And so part of it is just selfish and I just want to win. and I genuinely think that being kind and gracious and being willing to admit that you might be wrong sometimes.
Yeah.
You're gonna be more persuasive if you act that way.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Yeah, but what it comes off to, which I think is a beautiful thing, and Nesto and I, we're joking around. We've said from the beginning how like we're the people that we bring on, like we want to bring on pastors and different people that would challenge our viewpoints, right? And we've always said this is not going to be a debate, and we are all about loving people. And the thing that impresses me is that I get the sense that you walked away from a group of people that you still deeply love.
Oh yeah.
Like the way you talk to the Christians, even when they're snarky or even when, it's like, I don't get the sense that you're, because a lot of people like the angry atheist or that little stigma of like, once they walk away, they wild out, just fire off on everybody. And you're not like that. Although I did see a good tweet from you where it was like, speaking of Hillsong, it was like, I think it was Brian Houston. And he was like, if someone walks away from their faith, you should question if they had faith ever. And you just said, or how about just love them? I was like, bam, mic drop.
Yeah, but that was one of those ones where I was just like, I saw that tweet and I was like, I was a little pissed off because I was like, he's arguably one of the most influential pastors in the world. Yep. And to say something like that is so ignorant. It's like, I'm sorry, have you never had anyone that you cared about who's doubted faith? And like, if you want to bring them back in to put, anyone who's got doubts or questions, if your goal is to bring them back into faith, that statement does nothing to get you there.
Nah, nothing.
It pushes people away. And I'm just like, what the are you doing?
Yeah,
right?
say it, John. What the fuck are you doing?
I've got 17 years. I've got 17 years of it's ingrained in me on a microphone and on a camera.
I know. I understand. It goes quick. Trust me. When I let it go, it goes quick. Look, we had to do a whole episode about cussing because it went quick for us.
Yeah. Right. Well, I saw that tweet and I was like, oh, hell no. So, and I was just like, and also I was speaking from experience, because I'm like, I'm someone who I feel like my process of doubting and questioning and walking away from Christianity, it was very heartfelt, and it was hard, and it wasn't something that I went looking for, and it wasn't done casually, and I know so many other people that have had that same experience. Yeah. And I also know so many Christians who actually have loved me very well through this process. That I knew that I'm just like, well, he's just wrong. Yeah. And so I felt like it was worth calling him out, and it was cool. The 24 hours after that, I got a lot of love from a lot of people. So I appreciate it. Well, I
mean, you actually gave the Christian answer. You gave the answer the Christian's supposed to give.
Yeah, I mean, right? I felt like that was the case. Obviously, not.
I mean, in a lot of ways, when I hear you talk, there's almost a sense that there's still Christianity in a way, like in the way you represent yourself, in the way, and I like what you said earlier, because I had a similar experience too. It's like you didn't, while out, you didn't start shooting heroin, you didn't beat up your wife and just go off the deep end. Like, you're still the same dude. Yeah. You just got honest with yourself and said, I really don't believe this anymore, but I still love my wife. I still love people. I still want to do good in the world. Matter of fact, I think you'll probably do greater things now. And I've noticed one thing that you said earlier when you were saying how making that decision, you kind of felt out in like the unknown. Like how are things, and I relate to that, but one of the things that I came to very quickly was the freeing part for me was the thought that it's all in my hands, which means, and it always has been in my hands. Yes. And everything that I've ever thought and believed that God was doing for me, when I look back, it was actions that I took, and things that I did, and whatever else mixed up in there. But when I realized everything was in my hands, it was freeing, because it was like, I'm not waiting in faith on something. I can believe in myself, create a plan, and go do it. And my life has actually improved in so many ways.
I so relate to that. And for me, one of the things, a really pivotal moment for me was I did a documentary film in Uganda almost 2 years ago. And in some ways it was the stereotypical sort of like white dude from North America goes to Africa and like has his entire perspective on the world rocked. Like it was that cliche to a degree. But I came back, and when I was there, I saw unspeakable things, and that would be a long conversation if we get into it, but I had the thought, I'm just like, I've always believed that there was a loving God that wants to be involved in our lives and has the ability to reach into our lives and influence things and to have, have his hand on situations. And the stuff that I saw there, and I was just like, there's no way that can be true based on what I'm seeing right in front of me. Right. I mean, unless he just loves people in America more than he does people in Uganda, which I also can't believe. Right. So one of the things that hit me when I came back from that, and I was processing all the God stuff to do with that, is I was like, well, does suffering bother me? And it certainly does. And so then the next question was, what are you going to do about it? And so it actually led me to this place where I do more with nonprofits than I ever have. I think I give more than I ever used to. I seek out opportunities to be involved in things that alleviate suffering for people because it makes my life better. It brings me meaning and fulfillment. In a sense, I'm doing it selfishly because it makes me happy, right? It's like, and I no longer have the excuse, and I'm not saying everyone uses it as an excuse, but I think I did, the excuse that, oh, God's got it.
Exactly.
You know, when you see suffering, it's like, you know, I don't need to worry about it. God's got his hand on that situation. And now I'm just like, well, I don't know that God has his hand on that situation. So if that suffering bothers me, then Jon, you get off your ass and do something about it.
Yeah, I love that. That's so true. I mean, that's the thing. It's like Christians can be very critical of people when you get outside of their little religious box or wherever they think you should be. But and it's not to say that churches aren't doing a lot of outreach with actual physical needs being met, because they are. There's a lot of historically, there's a lot of good that churches have done, but it does come attached with the message to it and a lot of things. Whereas when you're outside of that, you're like you said, I'm going to get off my ass and these are the hands that are here now that actually can reach out and help somebody. And there's no strings attached. There's no like, now take this Bible too, or now listen to this preacher, or now, you know who did this for you? Actually, I didn't actually give you this rice. God gave you this rice. Like, no, you did. You just gave it to me.
You gave him the rice.
Jesus, bro. Jesus. You know,
I mean, my wife and I talk about this stuff a lot. And one of the things we noticed, both of us growing up, is that whenever someone says, oh, God will provide, especially within the Christian circles we came up in, almost sort of glorified not having money, because it was like, I mean, maybe it's because we grew up in sort of ministry oriented families. But there was this sort of like, oh, you know, we're doing the Lord's work and that's why there's no money. and so whenever money came in, you know, it would be like, oh, God, look, God provided. And my wife and I always look back at our lives and go like, I can't help but notice that whenever God provided, it came via someone who had a job and who had maybe succeeded in business and therefore was able to help.
Yeah, a human gave it to you.
So maybe I should do that. And maybe I could actually like do some good for people, you know, that way. You know? So,
it also comes down to just the structure of all of that we grew up in. The only way that it could sustain its energy and power is to keep almost 100% mysterious. Like, you had to not be able to answer logical questions to be able to ride that wave. And I think that's what's difficult with a lot of people nowadays, or anyone that kind of lashes out against people that walk away from it, is they know if they look at certain of the things that we looked at and was like, this just doesn't make sense. If they look at it, it feels like to them it'll rock their entire world. Like they don't believe they'd be able to walk away like we did and still be good people. Some of them believe this is the only thing keeping me from blowing up a building or going nuts.
I've had people say that to me, literally say like, you know, I get it, man. You know, like, man, I just, if I didn't believe in God, I mean, I would be out there doing heroin and I'd be having sex with anything that moved. And I'm just like, no, you wouldn't.
Or you would, but that's you. That's not necessarily because I don't know.
I just don't think that's true for very many people.
I know. I'm kidding.
I think that like people that really truly want that are just going to live that way anyways, and then they're going to go to church on Sunday and they're going to either not be honest about it or they're going to repent every Sunday.
Exactly.
But that's the scary part about it, is the what if. Like it's not even about necessarily like, what if there is no God and we've been lied to? It's just even some of the things that are presented to us, they're afraid to question at all because it's like pulling that string that it starts to unravel all these other things that they're not ready to deal with. And I think like with you guys early on, of course, because I personally believe that when you're in the music industry, when your life is geared around that level of creativity, which is kind of like magical, it takes you out of a box already. You're already a rebel because you're feeding off of like this invisible creativity that not everybody is. Some people are bopping to things, but you guys are creating words and sounds and mixing. That's a whole different level of no restraint, right? So when you put that, even within the Christian world, this is why, you know, Cook and I have been talking many times, and we know about people that were in the Christian music world that didn't believe. And they were still making albums and writing lyrics and doing, just like we know about ministers. That didn't really, that had questions, and so much to the point where they left their faith, but still are pastors at churches and creating sermons because they're too locked in. They got books, they got bills to pay, they got so much stuff that's relying on them keeping in that flow. But you guys, I think, broke free so early because you didn't have those restraints. And when you start missing Sundays and you're okay, that's a big one, dude. Because I know in my side of it, I was pursuing like the being a pastor and a you know, traveling minister and all of that. It wasn't the music side. So when you're in that side, you know, I went to Bible school for it. Everything is Sunday. And how important it is to don't miss the gathering of yourselves together. So you're constantly indoctrinated. You don't have a chance to break out and go, yeah, but what about? Nope. Right. Because there's all the answers are right there because you're in church. You got to listen to this guy constantly. But when you guys are out making music, creating things, and you're meeting with other people, you're coming in contact with other people's ideas and passions and questions. It puts you like what the Bible even would describe as what Jesus was doing. Walking around, not spending time in the temple, hanging out with drunk people and all kinds of people that we say, no, you shouldn't be doing that as a Christian. That's what he was doing, supposedly. And it's like when you start doing that, you really start getting a broad sense of life. You know?
Well, it's, I mean, dude, I agree with you. And like, one of the things that I find really interesting is that if you read through, say, the Gospel of Mark, which is scholars agree was the earliest written. So it's the first one written. It's also the humblest. It's the shortest. It has the least amount of, and there's no virgin birth, and a bunch of other stuff. But if you read what Jesus says in the Gospel of Mark, or what was written about him, that is sayings that are attributed to him, I would say, there's it's almost always caring for those less fortunate. Almost always. So what did he do? He went around casting out demons and healing the sick. And whenever he talked about the kingdom of God as at hand, I mean, he's a Jewish apocalyptic prophet. So he actually, I mean, he's not talking about heaven and hell. He's talking about the coming resurrection of the dead, which is what the Jews believed. And when he talks about how people should live over and over and over again, he's saying, take care of these people. You know, the parable of the sheep and the goats is a great example. It's like, because that's used as an example of saying, see, like Jesus believed in hell. And I'm like, well, that's interesting. He separated people by their actions towards the less fortunate. That's literally the moral of that parable, is to take care of the orphans and the needy and the poor. And he does that over and over and over and over again in Mark. And I read that Jesus and I go, that Jesus sounds like a Democrat.
Watch out, John. Watch out. I know. They already hate you, John. Watch out.
No, and obviously I don't think Democrats and Republicans are monolithic, but I just mean that, like, it seemed like his care for the poor and the needy and alleviating the suffering of people was front and center on his mind. When I look at Christian culture and the Christian culture that I was a part of, that was not front and center. You know what I mean? And so there's a disconnect there. But you're entirely right, Nesto, that, like, when you're participating in a culture, you're carried along by the momentum of the culture. And it takes a lot of effort to go in any other direction. And so most people just kind of go along with the group.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. Some of the stuff you're bringing up now, I'm like, okay, Jon, you're going to have to come back numerous times because each one of those things you just said is a whole podcast.
Oh, dude, I know. We could talk about.
You start talking about the Gospels and who wrote them. I'm getting triggered. I'm like, okay, yeah, let's talk about it. Mark is the earliest, but
yeah. I wake up about 4 a.m. every day because my kids wake up at 7, and I have to have some time before then just to myself. So I read from like 4 to 6, and then I run from 6 to 7, and then I do the rest of my day. So I've been doing that for a couple of years, and I've been studying Christianity for most of that time, and I'm astounded by the richness of the history in a good way, and also in a way that surprises me that most Christians don't know a lot of this stuff.
Yeah.
Dude, right. So true. I mean, one of the things that I think about that we've talked about on here before too is when I went to Bible school, fresh out of high school, and one of the classes that we had was called History of the Bible, and everybody hated it because it was like an old dude, and it was just like, it seemed like the most boring type of stuff, but he was talking about how we got the actual Bible. And I remember sitting in class going, do they know what they're saying right now?
Yeah.
This book wasn't put together until 300 years after the time of Jesus? Hold on. They didn't have a Bible? You got to be kidding me. You're telling me the book of Acts just went on and on. Everybody in a community providing for one another and all this until Constantine, until stuff that's not even in the Bible. You have to read outside of it to see when the Crusades happened.
Yeah.
When papal authority got when the Council at Nicaea, all the stuff that ended the purest form of Christianity that lasted 300.
Yeah. Well, and also,
I remember trying to talk to my other Bible school friends about that. I just learned it. I mean, all of the time growing up, it was just praying in tongues, healing people, just wild shit at high school. Like, yeah. Then when I went to Bible school and heard that, no one was talking about it. And they don't now. Care. I mean, they look at you like a deer in headlights if you say, yeah, the book of Acts. I mean, there was no time when it was supposed to end like that, when you just have one man talking and everyone sits back and listens. That's not even Christianity. Right. That's a form of Catholicism, and that's what you're doing. All your denominations keep doing the same bullshit, but reading from the Bible. It's literally senseless, dude.
Yeah, and so there were also there were other views about who Jesus was early on.
Yeah.
And you can actually read, if you look at Mark, which is the earliest gospel to be written, and then if you look at Matthew and Luke, which are about 10 years later, and then if you look at John, which is at least 10 years later, you can see a development of Christ's nature, of Jesus's nature. It's like Matthew, Mark, and Luke, definitely you don't necessarily get the sense that Jesus believes that he is God. And in John, you definitely do. Yeah. And in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, Jesus mostly talks in parables, and in John, he never tells a parable.
Yeah.
So there's a development of Christology throughout the whole process, and and it's really wild. I mean, that there were other views, like you mentioned earlier, that the Old Testament God seems kind of scary, and that Jesus seems really kind of nice. And the God of the New Testament seems like a loving father, and it's rather than the scary God of the Old Testament. Well, there were believers that actually believed it was two different gods.
How about that? Yeah.
And I think they were called the Marcionites, and actually Marcion, who sort of founded that belief, he was actually the first person to try and assemble a New Testament, and it only had the Gospel of Luke and then a collection of Paul's letters, and that was it. And his view was that those were the only ones that were true.
Interesting.
And even if you look at the Gospel of Luke, if you look at the beginning of it, he lays out this idea that there have been other gospels told, but the person he's writing to, he says, but I wanted to tell, I'm paraphrasing, but he says, he says, I thought it good to write this out so that you may know the truth.
Yes.
So if you have to say that you may know the truth, and also about 80% of the Gospel of Luke is taken directly from Mark. So he obviously had Mark. So he's saying, I've got Mark in front of me, but I want to tell you a story, and I want to tell you what's true. And Luke differs from Mark on a lot of things. And so it's like, right from the beginning, you have disagreement.
I know, dude.
And
there's a different Luke that did Acts, writing to Theophilus. I mean, that book should have been called Theophilus, but I mean, I used to think that Luke was the same Luke. Him.
Oh, you got...
You froze up a little bit there, Nesto. Yeah, say it again. You froze for a sec.
Oh, the two Lukes are different. The Luke from the Gospel of Luke, who wrote that, and the Luke who wrote Acts.
Interesting.
The letter to Theophilus.
I've actually never heard that. Every scholar that I've looked into, I was under the impression that Luke and the author of Acts are the same. But I'll have to look into that a bit more.
Yeah, I don't know either. Nesto did go to Bible school, man. I don't know if we should defer to him.
Nesto, your phone...
just the fact that...
Oh, he's freezing up.
Am I breaking up?
Yeah, you're freezing up.
Your phone might be overheating, bro.
See, he's getting too hot. See, that's what happens with Nesto.
That's all that fire you're spitting, bro.
That's it, bro. He gets too hot, and then see what happens. Take it easy, man. Put a fan on your phone.
Well, man. It's crazy stuff it's like you guys said, that there's a history there that most Christians don't know.
Yeah.
And if they did know, they would have questions.
Yeah.
And there are believers that know all this stuff and that have a way of reconciling it in their minds. But they're the vast minority.
Right. Yeah, I mean, the ones that are that do tackle these subjects, I find are to a degree not necessarily being fully intellectually honest with themselves in a lot of ways, because it's like some things just are so blatant, and they like you said, they reconcile it in some way that feels good to them, and then they just keep it going because they just don't, and I hear that I hear people like, hey, we deconstructed our faith and now we're like progressive believers, and a lot of it seems to be just a moving of the goalposts. Like our culture, our society, our earth moves on, and new beliefs are formed, and people realize that some of the antiquated things that they feel, they're going to get left behind, and their church or their God or their religion's going to get left behind if they don't, quote unquote, keep up with the times. Or like somebody digs something up in an archaeological find that sort of refutes things. They're like, oh. You got to find a way other than just being honest and saying, maybe some of this shit is just wrong.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Well, it's, I mean, I have the last 6 months or so, I've continued to flirt with Christianity here and there, because for me, it's like, I don't resent it. It's where I come from, you know? And there's a lot of really good things that I have in my life that I can attribute partially to Christianity, and anyone that grew up in Western culture in general, who's being honest, has to admit that that's true for them to a degree. So I, you mentioned progressive Christianity, and I've definitely had these thoughts of like, well, maybe is it possible that God is real and that we just got it really wrong, and like the Bible is definitely human and not inerrant, but has something meaningful to say. And like, maybe I could be a progressive Christian. And I've definitely like flirted with that idea. And then I keep reading and I'm just like,
I know.
I feel like I would be lying to myself.
Yeah.
But I have the desire. There is a part of me that really desires that. To be able to believe somehow.
Right.
But whenever I'm in my most honest moments, I'm in my most honest moments. I'm like, I don't think I believe it at all.
Yeah. I mean, that's
because it makes
similar.
us feel alone, dude. It's just like you said, you know, and you feel like
the thing about
helping us.
The thing about Christianity and we should probably start wrapping it up, but the thing about Christianity is that sense of security, right? Mm-hmm. The religion itself teaches you that you can know where you're going after you die. You can know like these facts of how the earth was created, who's up there. And it's almost an arrogance in how it's presented. Like, oh, we know. You guys don't know, but we know. And I remember one of the big things with me was I finally got to the point where I was completely okay saying, I don't know. Like if you ask me a question and I don't know it, it's cool. I don't know.
The best answer.
Exactly. But it doesn't mean I'm just going to accept what I used to accept on face value just to feel good about it. I'm not going to do it. I'd rather say I don't know, because when you say I don't know, it opens you up to a world of possibilities, and you might just learn something that you didn't know, instead of always assuming, oh, well, I know God, Jesus, Holy Spirit, get saved, go to church, you're good. And I know where I'm going after I die. Do you? You don't, because you haven't died yet. None of us really know. So that's it's a great place to be, I think. Just saying. I don't know.
Man. I think the place I'm at now for me is that I suspect God is not real, but if he is, I think he's more mysterious than we could possibly imagine. Mm-hmm. And I also would suspect that he's more gracious than we could imagine too.
Right. Because
if he's real and if he's good, he obviously has not made getting to understand him easy. So
not at all.
So if there's some sort of eternal, like if there's some sort of choice we have to make in this life and it has eternal consequences, and if it hinges on us like believing in him, I have to believe that if he's chosen to be this mysterious and this hidden, then I have to believe he casts a wide net.
Yeah.
You know?
I've felt that way definitely before too. You know what, man? We're going to have to there's so many topics. I would love to have you come back on and like a real specific,
sure,
scriptural or biblical or religious topic that we could really dive into, because we've probably said 45 of them.
Yeah.
On this.
Yeah. I've probably had that thought 30 or 40 times in this conversation, like, oh, we could do a whole podcast. I
know. And I start to go too, and I'm like, don't do it, because we wanted to make this about you and really like hear your story. And you know what? We definitely want you back when you release your book, because I know you're about to write a book at some point. There's no way you're not going to write a book. And don't even say I'm not, because you are. Even if you don't feel like you are now, I know you will. So you definitely got to come back and promote your book whenever you write it.
Oh, thank you, guys.
And I think there'll be a good one. But man, unless Nesto, I don't know if you have any other questions. Like we want to be mindful of your time, bro.
No, I mean, I know. I feel the same way. Like this is the kind of conversation that you could just have for hours and hours and hours. Like us, we would do this all off mic and just be talking about
this is how him and I are.
Till the sun rises. I know. I'm with you, because we heard what Cookbook said. He feels a little bit more towards the atheist side, and we're kind of like Scully and Mulder on the X-Files, because I've got a part of me that's like, I still want to believe, dude. My rationale is like, well, maybe there is a God, kind of like what you were saying, John. Maybe there's a God, but he doesn't have the power that we thought he did. Because when you say that God is all powerful, sees and knows everything, I always bring up the thing, then why is he watching little kids get raped? and not doing anything? There's so much shit that goes on that he could stop. Maybe we've given him more power. Maybe he's just an alien being or an advanced being that's a level up from us. Like Genesis, let's
don't know.
Man like us, and let's let them
who knows? See,
you
see another topic right there.
Yeah.
Well, you might be interested in this idea called open theism. I don't know if you've read about it.
No.
It's pretty fringe, but there's this guy that I've gotten to know a little bit. His name's Thomas J. Ord, and I'll email you afterwards.
Please do.
Link to his book. He has this book called God Can't, and basically his thesis, because if you're looking at the problem of evil, then and you see suffering, and this is the I'm trying to remember the philosopher that made this famous, there's something dilemma. Anyway,
the Euthyphro dilemma.
Euthyphro dilemma. That's
Euthyphro
it. Yeah.
dilemma. Yeah.
So it's basically like if we see all this suffering in the world, if God is really all powerful and all loving, then why is there evil and why is there suffering?
Right.
He either won't do anything about it or can't.
Yeah.
And logically, those are your only two options. Now, most Christians will take won't, but they'll dress it up because they don't want to say it like that, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But open theism and Thomas J. Ord, they basically say God can't, and their thesis is that he created the universe, and then he subjected himself to the rules of the universe that he created in order to have a relationship with us. And so I don't know that I necessarily buy his solution, but I think he nails the problem. And he has this one illustration in his book where he says, imagine that someone is being raped and Jesus is standing right there. Can you picture Jesus not doing anything about it? And anyone who grew up in a Christian home obviously should be horrified by this,
Right.
And I think that just nails the problem of evil, because if God is all powerful and all loving, then if he is real, then he does stand by while all these things happen.
Absolutely.
And that is a problem.
Yeah.
A really, really, really big problem. So I'll send you a link to his book. I think you might be, you may not be convinced. I'm not fully convinced, but I think it's a really interesting perspective I hadn't heard before.
Yeah, I would definitely look at it. And just to clarify, I may be leaning more towards, but like I said, I'm definitely open to hearing what people have to say. I'm not closed off.
Clearly.
I'm not like everything is done. I got it all figured out either. I'm still in I don't know too. And to think about how the earth was created, how the universe was created, whatever it is, God or no God, it's just fucking incredible. Like it's mind blowing. It's shit we can't understand and we may never know. You understand what I'm saying? So I'm open to, I mean, who the hell knows what, and more that we find out scientifically and stuff like that. I'm open to everything. Yeah. So I would be, I don't know if I'm open to open theism though, but I'm willing to look at it. I mean, it has some interesting thoughts at least.
I'd be open to it if it was real, I just don't know how I can know if it is.
Right. Yeah, how can you know? Right, exactly.
Yeah.
But
so
that I like what you said about sort of God, setting up a system and then maybe like having his hands off. It's one of the only ways that it could work.
Right.
But it seems to still bump up against some real pretty like blatant scriptures that say contrary.
I agree, and that's why I actually have plans to start interviewing some of these authors that I've been reading, if I can get them, and doing like that on a YouTube channel. And he's agreed to do one, so I'm going to do one with him.
Nice.
And I have a list of from his book about like, hey, how do you reconcile this? And how do you make this make sense? And doesn't that feel like you're making a pretzel there a little bit?
You know what? Oh man, I know you keep saying something. I want to keep going, but that's what I feel goes on in Christianity is making a pretzel. It's like you find a way to say a lot of big words and flowery language, but it still boils down to these basic things like the problem of evil, or these things that it's like, if he is who he says he is, everything you're saying in the philosophy and the books and quoting Flanagan and all these people, it boils up to nothing, because you can't get around these big things that are just simple things said with simple words. Yeah. It's something maybe that gives somebody who already believes comfort, but it's just not all the way honest. And so I always question that those people, why are they holding on to it? And what is it for them? And so hopefully maybe the people that you interview, you can ask them that, like, what is it? What is that thing that and a lot of times it's anecdotal, experiential things that they've had that makes them hold on to it. Well, I've had that. Nesto's had that. You've had that. And somehow we've come out on this end too. So I don't know. I mean, I think we should probably wrap it up. It's a journey, man. I know, dude.
Well, I'll say this, like both inside of Christianity and outside, one of the early things that poked a hole in my faith is after going to a Christian private school for most of my elementary school years, I went to a public high school, and I very much expected to walk into high school and have people hate me because I was Christian. And I discovered that was not the case, that there were a lot of people that didn't believe in God that were really good and really kind. And that sort of shook this idea of us versus them, right? Where I was like, there's a lot of people that aren't Christian that are acting kind of Christian, And so both as my experiences in life have expanded to the point where, like, I did this music video for an artist a couple of years ago where we flew around the world in a week.
Wow.
And we filmed in a different city, a different country every day for 7 days, which I don't recommend because you don't sleep. It's the worst.
Sounds awesome to me.
But we were in North America, we were in Europe, we went to Egypt, we went to Dubai, so we're in Muslim countries. We were in India, so Hindu. We were in China, so Taoist or Buddhist, and all these different people. In a week, I met people of all different persuasions, and my overarching feeling from the whole experience was, man, mostly people are good.
Yeah, yeah.
And I mean, I remember being in Egypt, watching the sunset between the pyramids of Giza, standing on a rooftop of a guy we met that day, and we started talking about Islam. And he knew we were Christian, and I asked him, like, what is your perception of Christians? And he was like, man, we're all people of the book, which is a Muslim thing I didn't know about until that point. And he's like, we're like cousins in the faith, man.
Interesting.
And I was like, I had never heard that before in my life. And so I guess what I'm trying to get at with all of this is that the more my perspective has expanded, the more I'm discovering goodness in places I didn't expect it. Yeah. And that bodes well for humanity and for the future. Yeah. And that gives me hope, and even us, we've never met before, and here we are, like, chopping it up, like having a great conversation about stuff that really matters.
Absolutely.
And that, I don't know, that makes me happy about life and the future.
Yeah, me too. I mean, and that's exactly why Nesto and I decided to do this show. Was all, first and foremost for us to take the conversations we are having privately and put them out for people also to join in, but also to reach out to people such as yourself and get our perspectives expanded and to build. You know, we want to build something and really understand. And I love what you say about just there is an inherent goodness, and most people, we all want the same thing. Whatever our background, our faith, our religion, our culture is we want our families, we want to raise good and, you know, love people, you know, those type of things. And those aren't confined to the Bible or any book. That's something that's in us, and we could debate where that came from, but at the end of the day, you know, this is the type of thing that should be promoted over any, you know, dogma or anything, you know. I think that's, you know,
everything that anybody wants boils down to love and significance.
100%. I agree with that.
Those are the two things everybody wants.
Yep. I've said that so many times. You look at we got to, I know we're just chapping it up. And Nesto's the movie guy, so he can attest to this. I don't care what movie it is. It could be a horror movie. It could be an action movie, a pure bloodbath, just crazy movie, but it's going to boil down to love at some point in there. Like you're fighting for somebody you love, your child, your mom, your country, something. Everything at the core is love. It doesn't matter what the story is or what we're talking about. And I think that especially in these times in our country, needs to be something that we all embrace a lot more.
Yeah, man. I'm with you there.
Yeah.
Well, shoot, man.
There's no better statement we could end this conversation on than what you just said.
Well, I think we should do that then. And John, bro, I mean, I always hate the phrase friend of the pod or friend of the show. I hate when people say that, but I'm saying it for you, bro. You are definitely our friend, a friend of the show. And anytime if you just have a thought and you're like, I want to go public with this, I want to talk about it,
I love it.
Just hit us up and we'll have you on at any time. I think Nesto, are you cool with that? Man. You down to have him back anytime you want?
Of course, dude. Bro,
yeah.
Nesto's like, I'm going to tell you otherwise when we get off the call here.
I never ever want that guy on again. No. Bro, I'm telling you, like I said, I've been telling Nesto, like, dude, this is the nicest guy. Like the way he talks about all of these tough issues. And so it's really a pleasure and an honor for us to have you on the show with us.
The pleasure is mine, man. Thank you for letting me, you know, chop it up with you guys for a couple hours. And
bro.
I feel like we're family now.
Absolutely. Absolutely, man.
I'm privileged to have you guys as friends, man.
No doubt. Likewise, the feeling is mutual. So we'll definitely stay in touch. And I'm sure, you know, our listeners, we call them the search party because we're searching for what's really real, and we like to party.
I like it.
You know, the search party.
I like it. Well, hey, one of these times I do shoots in LA occasionally. One of these times I'll stay a little late and maybe we'll go grab a drink or something.
Let's do it. 100%.
Oh yeah, dude.
100%. But what I was going to say is that, you know, they can be pretty interactive, right? So hopefully guys, if out there that's listening, if you have any questions for John, you know, make sure you email us ReallyThoPodcast@gmail.com. And we've made that a very open thing with our show. Like, I don't care what people send, we answer it. To the simplest, to the biggest questions, and we'll answer to the best of our abilities. And so if you guys have any questions from what we talked about today or any comments or whatever, we'll read it on the show. And if it's something for John, we'll pass it on to him. But ReallyThoPodcast@gmail.com. We really appreciate you guys listening. John, we appreciate you. Thank you for joining us, bro.
Yeah, dude. Thanks so much.
Talking to us from your doomsday bunker with your great hair, bro.
The Traeger grill.
Bro, thank you, John, for being so damn handsome, man. We appreciate that, bro.
Love you guys. Anyway, thanks so much, man.
Likewise, man. All right, bro. So we are out of here.
All right.
Good night.
Peace.
The point cannot be explained in words.